everybody. I'm so excited to be here, and it's a little chilly, but that's okay. So how many educators, teachers, full-time classroom teachers do we have here? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you are not currently teachers, but you have been at some point? Okay, most of you. Principals? Do you have any principals? A few. Librarian media specialists? Okay, IT directors? Good. Who have I left out? Curriculum directors? Don't have any curriculum directors, not here. Okay, who have I left out? Amazing college professors. Do we have some college professors? We do. Excellent. So we're talking about change and how can we influence change. Now, sometimes I dedicate my speeches, I do 7 or 8 speeches a year. I don't get out much. But actually, I think it's harder to teach teenagers than it is to do this because teenagers are quite a handful. But this is a lady who's an influencer in my life. Her name is Beth Holmes. And in 2008, she had me do my first talk. I started blogging in 2005. She was at the Center for Quality Teaching and Learning in Columbus, Georgia. She had me over. She presented me with a kind of a similar award to what you have here. And at the time, I was thinking about quitting blogging because I felt like I was real unimportant, that I was just a teacher. I didn't have much to say. My classroom wasn't super exciting. And she sat me down at lunch and she said, Vicki, you have to keep going. You have to keep doing this. This is important and you do have a lot to offer the world. And I just found out that Beth passed away on Friday, very unexpectedly. So I want to do this for her. I left it on her Facebook page. Her kids are on there. And I just want her to know, and her family, that you don't have to influence thousands. You don't have to be up here on this stage to influence. All of you are influencers, every single one of you. And it's very important that we influence positive change. Our world needs this. Now, we're going to start off with a story of a nuclear power plant. There was a nuclear power plant that had a problem. And if you have a nuclear power plant with a problem, you need to bring somebody in. So they brought in a consultant. Now, don't say boo, and some of you are consultants, so that's okay. I know my friend Chris is a consultant. So they brought in a consultant, and he stood there for 3 days, and he watched what they did. And he scribbled on his little notepad, and he watched, and he scribbled, and he watched, and he scribbled. Finally, he said, would you give me a step stool? So they gave him a step stool, and he walked up the step stool. He pulled out a Sharpie. He wrote an X on a knob. He walked down the step stool. He said, replace that knob, and he left. Well, the next week, they got a bill for $10,000. The head of the nuclear power plant called and said, well, I'd like to know and get this bill itemized. I want to know why you think that we owe you $10,000. I heard all you did was scribble on a board for 3 days and pull out your Sharpie and write an X on a knob. How is that worth $10,000? He said, sure, I'll itemize it, and this is the bill he sent. For placing the X on the gauge, $1. For knowing which gauge to place the X on, $9,999. The point is he knew where to focus. And that's what we have to do as educators. There are too many choices. There are too many things. How many of you get overwhelmed by technology? You get overwhelmed. You don't know what to do next. But our secret is we have to know where to focus. Now, you're going to see this me come up on the screen. That is the one thing that you can change in your school system. There's one thing and one thing only. You can't change your principal. You can't change your curriculum director. You can't, unless you are the principal, of course. You can't change anybody, but you can change who? Who can you change? Me. So when I ask you, I can change who in my district? Me. I can change? Me. One more practice. I can change? Me. Okay. So we all understand that I can change? Me. I'm so glad that you're awake. So I can change me. And when I get down and I think about quitting and I think about stopping, I always come back to the point. You know what? When I close that door to my classroom, I control the weather in my room. Things may be totally gone to hell in a handbasket in the front office. But my room is my room. I do not have to let anything pass that door, because I can control me. That's who I can control. I can't control the fact that I don't have a lot of money to spend. I can't control the fact all this social media gone crazy and things that happen on Facebook. I can't control the fact that a lot of people say that teaching's not a great career to be in. I actually think that right now is the best time that's ever been to be in teaching. We get to be part of the revolution of education. It's totally transforming. Where the music industry was 15 years ago, we are right now. It's an exciting time. And I can't control the fact that even in my school, kids get pulled out, and I've heard that a lot of your computer labs now are being used for testing, and you can't use them for creating. You can't control that. You cannot. Can't. I am so tired of the word can't, but there is something that we can do. Here and now, we can ban the word can't. We can stop saying it. We can stop talking about what we can't do, and we can start talking about what we can do, because there are things that we can do. And what is one thing we can do? I can control me. I can control me. I can control my attitude. I can control who I am. Now, some of you can say, okay, Vicki, you're very rah-rah, Zig Ziglar, all this mess. But this is born out of, I've almost quit at least twice, including last year when I was in charge of prom and IT, and they gave me 6 classes, and I had 1 planning period, and a homeroom, and those juniors and their parents, it was the night under the big top. It was a circus theme, and trust me, it was a circus theme. It was gorgeous, but I thought I was losing my mind. So, and I almost quit, and a fellow teacher saved me. She actually went in the front office and did some things that helped me be able to stay, because I was at that point. But every time I get to that point, it comes back to, you know what? I love these kids. I love to teach, and I can control me. I can control myself. But here's the thing. A lot of people are waiting on Superman. They're waiting on somebody else to fix it. We don't need Superman. What we need is Super-Can. Because money, as much as we need money and people aren't going to fix things. It takes hardworking people like you and me who say, I can control my classroom. I can improve things. I can do things. Because here's the thing about education. If I say I can control me, then I'm just one little me. But what if my attitude, you know that teacher's lounge? Okay, sometimes I hide from the teacher's lounge. If things are doing this right here, I don't go there. If things are doing this, I don't go to lunch unless I have lunch duty, and then I eat with the kids. There are times where we have to kind of avoid that. But if I decide that I can control me and I have a good attitude, and somebody else decides that they can control me, then now we have 2 people at our school who have decided, you know what, we're not going to settle for this. We're better than this. We can change things at our school. And then all of a sudden you can start having a lot of positive me's. Because you know what? Positive can change, can transform, can spread from person to person, just like negative. We mirror those we're around. If you smile, what does everybody else start doing? Turn around and smile to your neighbor. We need some smiles this morning. Okay. When you start smiling, other people start smiling. The way we feel is contagious. You know, have you ever walked up to somebody and say, how are you doing? And they say, I'm getting by. You're like, goodness, you know, I'm not going to ask you anymore. So if enough of us say that I can control me, then all of a sudden we become a supermajority. We become a super-can. And that's how change happens, when enough of us decide we're not going to settle for this, and it happens at every school. You might think there's a perfect school down the street because you don't work there. Okay? If you work there, you'll find out it's not so perfect. Every school has problems. But every teacher has to decide, I can control me. It's tougher to teach than ever before. There are more distractions. Some of these kids, they get entertained when they go home, and they want to be entertained at school. And people say, well, you can't give them homework. So I asked the other day, I said, well, what is your child going to do when they get home? Are they working? Well, no. Do they play any sports? Well, no. What do you have them doing? Do they have chores? Well, no. And I'm sitting here thinking, you know, I grew up on a farm and I had to work. If I wasn't at school, I had to work. What is your child doing that they need to not do homework? You know, now I don't give much homework in my class, but I do think it's healthy to do some things at home, because, you know, when you get done with your day, you still have to go home and file your taxes, don't you? That's homework. You've got other things you've got to do at home, and we'll all have that in our lives. But I can control me. So great, influential teachers start by determining the focal point for myself and my classroom at each moment. That is where we start with influencing positive change. So where do we focus? Let me get out this is my one note for the whole speech. I do this for my kids, and they're like, Miss Vicki, why do you do this? It's like, I can't remember some numbers, and for some reason I can't remember this. So in 1986, there were 3.5 million cases of the guinea worm. Anybody ever heard of the guinea worm? Okay, it's a horrible parasite, and it was in 20 different countries. It lives in stagnant water, And it's like a water flea. It's really, really small. And when people swim in that water, it gets into, well, when they drink the water, it gets into their bloodstream, and it goes through their bloodstream, and then usually it will grow on the arm or on the leg. It's very, very painful. It takes months to grow. And then when it emerges, it'll emerge out the bottom of the foot, typically, and it burns. It's horrible, and the only relief is going in water. Well, when you go in water, it lays its eggs and it starts over. It's a horrible parasite that in many third world countries. And they were dealing with, well, how are we going to change this? What are we going to do to get rid of this parasite? Because why do people gather water in third world countries? They don't have plumbing. They have to go get the water. So who was going to get the water if the mom and dad had the guinea worm? How were they going to feed their family? So they couldn't get rid of it. What were they going to do? And the Carter Center right up the road from me in Americus, Georgia, started working with this. And they started looking at what are the focal things that we can do. Now, the first thing they found is do not send in a consultant. Okay? Do not. And this is why when a school calls me and they say, Vicki, we just need you because we have got to change our school. And I will always say, no, I'm not coming. I know, Chris, I heard you say the same thing. No. I don't transform schools, you do. You transform your school, I transform my school. If you're not already moving in that direction, if you don't have enough me's moving in that direction, it's very hard. An outsider pretty much can't come in and do that. So they had to educate the local shamans. They had to teach the women. They found out that their dresses made great filters. Just having the women pour the water through their dresses would get those, you could actually see them floating in the water, would get those awful guinea worm larvae out of the water so that people could drink. So they had all kinds of things that they could do. They focused on 3 or 4 focal behaviors, and they completely transformed it. And in 2009, there were only 3,190 cases in 4 countries. It will be, after smallpox, it will be the second major human malady that will be eradicated in our world, we hope. And it was because they identified the focal behaviors. Now, why do I tell that story about that awful, gruesome, nasty-sounding guinea worm? Well, the reason I tell you that is if they can elicit change in that really hard, tough situation, then we can have change in our own situations by determining the focal behaviors of what do we need to do to help things change. So discover a few vital behaviors, change those, and problems, no matter their size, topple like a house of cards. Now you're going to notice these little read icons all the way through my talks. I love to read. I read about an hour a day at least. A fellow named Brian Tracy says if you want to be in the top of your field, read an hour a day and you can be in the top 10% of your field. So about 6 years ago, I said, you know what, I'm really going to commit to this. And it does make a difference. So you're going to find books all through this, and this will be on Edmodo so that you can go back and read these books because there's some great books. But Carrie Patterson, The Influencer, The Power to Change Anything, is a fantastic book about promoting change and how to do that. So we're looking for the vital behaviors to take us to a 21st century classroom. And what are they? But isn't the way that we've always taught good enough? Now I'm going to show you some charts you've probably already seen. First of all, this is the workforce requirements by education level by 2018. Okay? Only 10% of our jobs will be able to be gotten by high school dropouts. Now, when you have a dropout rate of 20 to 30%, that tells us that we have a significant amount of our population in this country who will not be able to get a job because they will not have education. And that's a scary thing to think about. We've got 28% if you have a high school diploma, you can get the job. We have some college, associate's, bachelor's degree, and a graduate degree. Okay, so we're looking at requiring and needing more education to be successful in our world. This is just a fact. A lot of it has to do with this country and the kinds of jobs we have. They're knowledge jobs. They require an education. But I always tell my students, I'm in a farming community. Anybody in a rural or a farming community like I am? A lot of you? I always tell my students that you can get 10, maybe 20 years out of your back if you're lucky, but you need to get a lifetime out of your brain. Your brain is very important because a lot of my kids, they make so much money going working on that tractor that that's all they see. They don't realize that when they're 40-something and they give out, that it's going to be really hard to go back to school like some of them end up having to do. Okay, this is our graduation rate as it compares to the rest of the world. We're in orange here. There's some new statistics that have just come out from the OECD, but it's still not looking too great for us in terms of the percentage. So it's below 80% that are actually graduating from high school right now, which is a real problem for us. But if we look at tasks carried out by the American workforce. Now, how many of you have heard of workforce readiness? Don't boo. How many of you have, okay. This is what businesses are getting upset about, and you need to be aware of this so that you can communicate with your school boards and you know what they're talking about, because these are the slides that they're looking at. So abstract tasks are going through the roof. Abstract tasks say HOTS. HOTS. Higher order thinking skills. That's abstract tasks. Things that they're not a clear answer to. Now, my husband is an engineering manager down in Cairo, Georgia, and they have to test people that come out of the local school system to hire them. And he says at least once a week his HR department comes to him and says it's happened again. What they're talking about is a private joke, because they have to measure in really tiny little increments. So they will have a ruler there. They actually have a little gauge, little calipers that they have to measure. So they'll measure, and somebody will say, where are the answers? And HR's like, there are no answers. You have to read that and tell us. Well, where are the multiple choice answers? And they're like, there are no multiple choice answers in a factory. You either measure it or you don't measure it. And that happens all the time. And by making kids think that life is multiple choice. You know, when I looked at marrying my husband, I didn't have 3 choices and go, I'll pick Kip. It doesn't work that way. Life is not multiple choice. So we need to have them making decisions. You know, I always tell my teachers when they give an assignment, don't say make a PowerPoint. I ask them to say make a multimedia presentation of your choice. Choose. I want it to be multimedia. Or create a compelling, sometimes I'll let them do a presentation or a video, or it may end up in Flash. I mean, who knows what it ends up in. But I say, I want a compelling presentation on such, and it can't be more than X number of minutes. Give them as little limits as possible and let them use their higher order thinking. But memorizing is not, and not going to college will not create success. Okay, and that's where we're heading in this direction. And we all, as educators, have a lot of opinions for why it's that way. But okay, is the big but. We talked about big butts yesterday. The big but is I can only control who? Me. That's it. Okay, you can look at the big picture, but I can only control me. Now, I will tell you, so educators, we are the new media. This is why educators should be on Twitter and Facebook. We have influence we never had before. You know, I care about this country, and that was one reason my friend Beth told me to keep writing. Vicki, you love this country. You love educators. You love teachers. You need to keep writing because you can influence change, even though you're, quote, just a teacher. I can change me. So why do we care about 21st century classrooms? Okay, let's look at the world's largest population. See that little yellow sliver? That's us, 4.5. Okay, let's look at GDP. Okay, gross domestic product. You can see the U.S. is the blue line. By Actually, I've seen some newer numbers that say 2030 is when the lines will cross, and China will surpass us. India is way on out to 2050. Now, there's a great book called The Coming Jobs War by Jim Clifton, who is the head of the Gallup organization. And every political leader and every superintendent, and really I think every principal should read this book. He's the head of the Gallup organization, and he found one thing. People want hope of a job. And the other thing he found, he has a chapter on education, and he found that when students quit is when they lose hope that they can graduate. When they lose hope that they can graduate, that's when they quit. So it's not about anything else, it's about hope. And those are the things that we need to have. But we need to understand this. This is actually taken, some of my students are right in front of me. This is taken in China. My students work with kids all over the world through my classroom. I've taken kids all over the world through some opportunities that have happened, but successful people will be able to work with people from China, India, and beyond. We have to be able to work with the world. We cannot just cocoon and say we're just the United States. We can't collaborate. How many of you are already connecting your classrooms with some other classroom somewhere else in the world? Good for you. Excellent, because it's easier than ever. Mystery Skype. There's so many ways that we can do this, because here's the thing. I can control who? Okay, how many of you have already mystery Skyped? Some of you who raised your hands probably got mystery Skype. You got Google Connected Classrooms. They have a connected classroom with Roald Dahl today. They have all kinds of virtual field trips through Google. So they have all kinds of things that are happening that you can do. But I can control me. So the first habit is I believe in myself, my students, and my school. Now, I had a baby sister who was born when I was in 5th grade. And we don't have any children in the room, do we? I don't want the secret to get out. Okay, my parents told me in 5th grade that you've got a baby sister, and our rule on Santa Claus is, if you believe, you receive. Okay? If you believe, you receive. And you know what? I still believe, and I still get Santa Claus. We never got rid of it. We all get together at this place called The Shed, about 20 of us, and we all have big old presents from Santa, and we're just ridiculous. It's our family's really bad habit besides eating. But this is Christmas, and there's my little bag there, my baby sister. So if you believe, you receive. Now, how does that apply to us? Well, they had a study of expectations, and they pulled in 3 teachers. And this is an old study. A lot of you will have heard it. It's from Pygmalion in the Classroom. It was done in 1968. They pulled in 3 teachers, and they said, you know what? We're going to give you the top students. And we picked you because you're the top teachers. And we're going to give them to you for a whole year. And this is an experiment, and don't tell anybody. You cannot tell a soul, because if people find out, we're going to have a problem. I'm not going to tell a soul. And you're going to have them the whole year, and we're going to see what happens. Well, not surprisingly, they led the school in the district in standardized test scores. How many of you would love it if you were told you were the top teacher and you were given the top students? Raise your hand. Okay, you would absolutely love it. Okay, they led the district. They had a 20 to 30% academic achievement jump for every child. And then the whopper came, okay? At the end, they found out the selections were random of both the teachers and the students. Okay? Completely random. The only thing that they had was the teachers' belief that they had the best students and that they were the best teachers. That was the only thing different. How do we explain that? We explain that because what we believe is what we receive. Now, I don't want you to be blind about it, and sometimes you have a kid in your class and you're like, goodness, what? You know, I'm supposed to teach this child. They don't even like me. You know, I mean, I have one kid and he just talks while I'm talking, and I'm like, what am I going to do with him? You know, I do everything I can. I love him because he's hurting, and that's why he's doing it for attention. I have to deal with that a different way. But what do we believe about our kids? If you believe, you receive. Experiment after experiment proves this out. Do you know that 90% of people in prison were told by one or both parents that they would end up in prison? 90% of people in prison were told by a parent they would end up in prison. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Our minds try to do what we are told that we're supposed to do, even when that's to our detriment, even when it hurts us. So here's some pictures of some of my students. Now, when I started at Westwood, I had no idea I was going to end up in teaching. I was actually teaching teachers how to use technology in the classroom. I was teaching at the college level. Before that, I was the general manager for Cellular One. I was in business. I had no idea I was going to end up. And my curriculum director was acting principal. My school, where my students, my children are, was in turmoil. And she called me in and she said, Vicki, you know, your school really needs you, because I graduated from the school. Your school really needs you. Everything's a mess, and we need you. And you would make a great teacher. And I said, oh, I just don't see that. She said, no, Vicki, you would make a great teacher. I'm like, I can teach adults, but you know, I'm a businesswoman, and I can fire employees, and you can't fire your students. You know, you have to teach whoever you get. And she said, no, you'll love it. And so I said, sure, I'll do it. And that was 12 years ago. I fell in love with the kids. I said, you know, this is what I want to do. I keep getting a chance to leave the classroom. I mean, I've been out there. I've done that. I get to travel and meet amazing educators 5 or 6 times a year. But I have a 6th grader, I have a high school senior, and I have a freshman at Georgia Tech. 2 of my 3 kids, including my freshman at Georgia Tech, have learning differences. I don't call them disabilities, but have learning differences. They needed technology to learn, and they needed me. So I'm glad I got to be there. But when I went to Westwood, I told them, I said, and I got laughed at. It was an assembly. And I said, I'm so glad to be here, but I just want you to know that I am here to build a world-class technology program at Westwood Schools. No less. We don't compete with the school down the street. We don't compete with anybody anywhere in the state of Georgia. We compete with the world, and we will be one of the best technology programs in the world. That's who we'll be. And I literally got laughed at. I'm not kidding. There were students, who is she? And when I got in that computer lab, they'd been looking at porn. And I mean, oh my gosh, it was just, they went home and they're like, we don't like Miss Vicki. Well, of course, they were sitting back in the corner looking at women and all kinds of stuff. So it was not what I wanted them to do. But these are just some of the awards that my classroom has won. I've had the George Lucas Foundation filming a student. I've had all kinds of things coming to my classroom. But you know what? It started with me. Those are the same students in the same school that were allowed to sit there and look at porn. And now they're winning all these amazing awards. And it was what I believe in. I believe in myself and I believe in my students. And I will not stop. And it is exhausting. Every year I have to change. I shared yesterday, when you're green, you're growing, and when you're ripe, you're rot. If I ever get to the point where I think that I have arrived, then I am rotting. I am over. I am done, because I teach technology and I have to push them and I have to push myself. So, and the other thing I wanted to point out, in 2006 when we started the Flat Classroom Projects, which went on to win ISTE's Online Learning Award, I had 6-year-old computers. I'm presenting right now on a 7-year-old computer. I don't have a lot of money. I have Windows Home Vista on this dadgum computer, for goodness sakes. Okay? You don't have to have a lot of fancy stuff to do amazing things. You are the amazing that you bring to your classroom. I can use anything anybody gives me, and I can do whatever I want with it, because I will not stop. I am the equation. I am the part that will not stop and will demand that we will be excellent in my classroom. I am the center of my attitude. And when I get ready to quit, and when prom has me screaming in the dark, I start thinking about I am the center of my attitude. Because a lot of times in teaching, it's the extra stuff we get given that makes us want to quit. It's the homeroom, it's the seniors. I have seniors this year in homeroom. Oh my gosh, getting a lunch count out of seniors is like, oh, I meant to raise my hand. Yeah, right, okay, raise your hand. Are you eating hot dogs or whatever? So, 2 kinds of people in the world: transmitters and transformers. Only 2. And this is from Dale Carnegie's amazing book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. If you have a problem with worry, read it. I reread it about every 2 to 3 years. There are transmitters and transformers. Transmitters transmit all the negativity, all the bad stuff that happens to them, to everybody else. Okay? Every single one of you have something in common. Every 2 to 3 months. People who study the lives of humans, they find something. You're either coming out of a crisis or you're going into one. And if you are in a little bit of a level playing field, you better enjoy it, because you're going to be going back into one pretty soon. Every 2 to 3 months we have a crisis. If you're waiting to be happy until you have no crisis at your school and you have no crisis in your life, you will never, ever be happy. So we have to learn to live with this. We have to learn how to be transformers, not transmitters. Not this kind of transformer. This kind of transformer. We need to turn the negativity into something positive. And I love Jody Kennedy. I was back in New York. They were having some really hard times when they were right in the middle of their budget cuts. And I was talking to Jody, and she was doing incredible things, and everybody else was struggling. She was doing amazing things. And she said, you know what? We sat down, and this was an IT group. We sat down and we decided that we had an excuse to cut all the stuff that didn't work because we didn't have enough money to fund it anymore. So all the pet projects that just didn't work, they got rid of them. They said, you know what? They don't work. So when things go south, when we start not having money, it is the perfect excuse to kill the projects that are not paying back. And we know what they are. And we have people we love that love those projects. But it is time for us to say, you know what, in this country, we have no room for anything that doesn't work with kids. And it's about the students. It's not about having an extra 3 or 4 cushy jobs over here or this. It is about the students. And our focus has to be there. And we need to be transformers. We need to transform the negativity and say, you know what, there is a way that we can do things. Because a lot of times when budgets go down, our hearts and our minds and our hands get busy, and then we actually improve things. But our big but is, I can only control who? Me. I can only control me. And if we can get that point in our brains, trust me, it will change your classroom. Now, administrators, a lot of you raised your hands. You have 2 choices. You can either remove the obstacle or be the obstacle. That's it. And if you're the admin who's the obstacle, it is almost impossible for people to get around you. Visionary leadership is needed more than ever. Just because you're a great teacher does not make you a great manager. And if you're a manager, you need to read that book I mentioned, The Coming Jobs War, because it actually talks about one of our biggest problems in America is that we have unengaged workforce. We have people who are not bringing their hearts to work because they have sorry managers who are not dealing with problems and not firing people who should be fired. And that is the truth. Some of my darkest days in education have been when my child had a horrible teacher to the point of being abusive, and that teacher was not dealt with. Because you know, as a teacher, that we should be excellent. We should always help children. We should not hurt children. And when that happens, it's hard for a school to make it when you have bad teachers. It is. And you know what? Every school has them. You're always going to have a few teachers who just don't need to be around children. They don't. And all we can do is speak every chance they ask us and tell them and do advocate for the kids. I never leave kids twisted in the wind. If I know a kid's having a hard time and has a teacher problem, they know they can come to me and I will butt in. I'm sorry. If a kid's hurting, I butt in. Because if a kid trusts me enough to talk to me, that's a big deal if a kid trusts you enough to talk to you. How many of you have kids from other classes who talk to you and you don't even teach them? That is a big deal. They trust you. You are being their best to them because you're encouraging them and you're giving them advice, and that's a big responsibility. But as you look at this, you see you've got the students, the teacher, the class environment, and the admin, and all of these things surround the students. The students can't get out there unless you make it available to them, unless you open it up to them. So our first habit is the biggest habit. It takes the longest to talk about because habit number 1 is I believe in myself, my students, and my school, and I transform situations by removing barriers with my positive attitude. Now, can you do that? You can, and let's talk about how to have a positive attitude. Habit number 2 is that my classroom evolves. It needs to transform. It needs to move. Now, some of you know me as Vicki Davis, cool cat teacher. My students actually named me. In 2005, I went to the GAETC conference, and my curriculum director had told me that I needed to do a lot of research-based best practices like these. She actually, at the time, was making me get rid of my exam in computer science, which was a 250-question exam. I was pretty proud of it. I went to Georgia Tech, and so I'm an exam kind of person. And she said you have to put in some authentic assessment, and you have to do some project-based learning in your course. That's what we want to do for you. And this was how I felt. And I was by myself. Nobody went with me. They just sent me, all by my little lonesome, to be able to do all these things. Well, I went back to my school and I did start blogging. I knew that I needed to blog, and my students, I was sitting there and I said, what am I going to call this blog? And they said, well, Miss Vicki, we're the Westwood Wildcats, and you're pretty cool, so why don't you be the cool cat teacher? Now, my oldest son, who's now in college, keeps saying, Mom, you need to just be the cat teacher because you're not cool. I'm like, son, I've already got the name, so you're just going to have to just live with it. But I wrote this blog post about studying Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. A lady named Julie Lindsay in Dhaka, Bangladesh responded, and that was how the first Flat Classroom project was founded in 2006. We collaboratively wrote a wiki together. We just had 24 students. And then we created video together, and we outsourced part of the video to our partner on the other side of the world. Now, in 2006, it was a pretty big deal to send video. Most of us were on dial-up 56K. I think I had 128K in my computer lab. I had Pentium 3 computers with 128 megs of RAM. They were old. It was hard to do, but we did it anyway, and we overcame. Now, the Flat Classroom projects have grown thousands of kids every semester from kindergarten all the way up. And it's huge, and it's massive. And I actually had to decide this spring if I was going to keep flat classrooming all the time or not. I'm kind of stepping back from it just because I want to stay in the classroom. That's what I love. That's what I do. So this is a current thing my students are doing, the Arab-Israeli conflict simulation out of the University of Michigan. I think every current events kid should participate in this. This is actually the first slide taken. We were presenting with the University of Michigan at the Global Education Conference. With the students at the University of Michigan. It's a powerful tandem learning experience because Jeff Stanzler, the professor at U-Michigan, is teaching pre-service and master's level ed students. And they are the mentors and the NSAs for this amazing project. I'll talk more about it in one of my later sessions today. I have Genius Hour going. Here's some of my students assembling robot. Great book called The Passion-Driven Classroom for how to do this. I have some maker spaces I'm putting in. Anybody doing maker spaces? Yeah, these are some of my girls planning and plotting with that. Great book called Invent to Learn, which I highly recommend if you want to do maker spaces. Now, pardon the banana in the front here. This was homecoming week, and he's dressed as a banana. But I do a lot with multi-age groups. In fact, Wednesday through Friday of this week, we are teaching every elementary kid in our school, kindergarten, K-5 through 5th grade. My 9th and 10th graders are planning the lesson plans today, and they planned them on Friday, to teach them an hour of coding for our whole elementary, because I was writing a blog post for Edutopia, and I've started writing for them now. It's called 15 Plus Ways to Code Even When You Don't Have a Computer, how to teach kids to code. And I realized that I was writing this amazing stuff, and I was saying that everybody needed to code, and then I was going to be a hypocrite because we weren't going to do anything for our code with our elementary. So I went to my curriculum director last Monday, and I said, Miss Betty, I have a problem. I can't be a hypocrite. Can we teach every kid in the elementary school how to code? So it has 300-something kids, and we're going to do it, though. We've got a plan, and it's going to happen. We're going to use Tinker, and we're going to use Scratch 2.0. But we do a lot with multi-age groups. If you're struggling with staffing, this is a great way to do it, because if you want kids to really understand something, make them teachers. And so we use multi-age groups all the time. They were actually teaching some really cool search capabilities there. So my classroom evolves, and it connects with multiple audiences. It connects with audiences at my school, in my community, and around the world. So how do we connect? How do we connect with the world? I love this because this is one of my students talking with a student in Qatar. And the funny thing is, from South Georgia, when we start connecting with people, how many of you have heard of Jeff Foxworthy? Okay, so they start telling redneck jokes. And, my student is sitting here saying, okay, we don't all marry our cousins. Okay. Well, the student in Qatar was saying, we don't all live in tents and ride camels. And so they were trying to get past the stereotypes. And that's what happens. Students are the greatest book ever written for each other. And you get past the stereotypes, and kids get to know each other for who they are when you start connecting on a global basis. It's a very powerful thing to do. And we need to help kids build their learning pathway. I help my students build their PLN. We use Twitter. We use all kinds of things. I teach them RSS readers and how to do that. Again, I'm going to talk about that in my, I think it's in my tech-driven differentiated instruction later today about how to build a learning pathway. But it's 21st century skills. I don't really like skills because I think it's kind of a way of thinking. I don't teach skills. I teach how to think about 21st century tools and how to use them to get jobs done. But it's also about 21st century connections and how to connect with others and how to find people who do amazing things. Audience is important. Kids are tired of wastebasket work. They're tired of doing things for you that they know you're going to throw in the trash can. They want an audience. Wastebasket work does not motivate students. So they need to be doing authentic, real things that other people are going to see. Whether they're teaching younger kids or whether they're publishing, we have a class YouTube channel. Whether they're publishing to the YouTube channel or whatever they're doing, they need to be sharing with others. Now this is Casey. She just graduated from college, actually. She was in the first Flat Classroom project. This was the second project we did called the Horizon Project. There's a new project called NetGen now that's based on this. And this was her team that she had managed. She got in the honors program at the University of Florida, and they told her, they said, you know what, Casey, your grades are like everybody else's. They're absolutely amazing. But the thing that makes you different is you have managed an international team. These kids are from Austria and China and the US and Bangladesh. They wrote a wiki together, they created a video together, they did work together, and they collaborated. And they were never awake at the same time because she had all different time zones here. She had Europe, she has Asia, she has all over the place. I think she might have even had Australia. But she had a lot of people, and that's what she did. So this is what I want my students to be: collaborators. I want them to connect. Here are some of the Flat Classroom conferences we had and some of the places we've been. I try to take my students wherever I can. This is the Arab-Israeli conflict simulation. This is another way that my students connect, where they play world leaders. So my classroom connects, it evolves, it connects with multiple audiences, peers, and cultures using both synchronous and asynchronous. Now, some of you already know what those terms mean, but let's just go into it real quick. Synchronous is like synchronized swimmers. It's at the same time. This is what everybody wants to do when they collaborate because it's sexy and it's attractive. You know, we talked with kids in Africa, and that's great. But I had somebody call me once and they said, Vicki, we need some advice on using our video conferencing center. We want a video conference with kids in Africa. And I said, well, who's going to get up in the middle of the night? And they're like, what? So, well, somebody has to get up in the middle of the night for you to do that because we don't think about time zones. So we have to be able to collaborate asynchronously. If I would set as a goal as a teacher, as an elementary teacher, if you can have 2 to 3 international connections a year, it's enough. If you try to do more, you will burn out because there are teachers all the time who burn out trying to do more than that. And you can try and you can do it. But we Skyped with a class in Nepal with our 5th graders a little while back, and we had to come in at 7 in the morning, and we made it optional. You cannot require kids to come to school at 7 a.m. We made it optional, and do you know every kid, even the kid that always comes in at 8:30, okay, every kid in that whole class showed up on time at 7 a.m. to Skype with Nepal. That's how excited they were. It was crazy. It was a Monday, too. So how do you do that? So there's Mystery Skype. The Mystery Skype hashtag on Twitter is a great way to find people to Mystery Skype. There's also Google Connected Classrooms. Their first one they kicked off was a field trip to the space station, a Google Hangout. If you have Google Apps for Education, you need to look at enabling it for your teachers, Google Plus for your teachers, and if you have older kids, you need to look at it and enable it for them because it gives you access to all these really cool things. But then you've got asynchronous. Asynchronous is not at the same time, and I think in some ways it's more important. It's not as sexy, but it's very important. So we need to ask ourselves, used to at the beginning of things, parents would come in and they would say, don't allow my kids to access this. Keep them safe from that. Well, I think that parents and educators, we need to be demanding, what are you bringing in? Who are my students connecting with? Who are they talking to? How are we connecting globally from this school? Not what are we blocking. We have the wrong mindset. We need to flip it and say, who are we bringing in and who are we connecting with? We bought a world map at our school, and now every single time somebody makes a connection in a year, we put it on the map. You can get the dry erase world maps that are world size, and you can write on it with dry erase, and then you erase the year, and then you start over. Because teachers start taking pride in, I connected with China, I connected with Australia. And it's a selling point for your school if you have a global mindset. Again, students are the greatest textbook ever written for each other. What are you bringing in? How are you connecting? These are important things to do. So, my classroom evolves and connects with multiple audiences, peers, and cultures using both synchronous and asynchronous communications methods. This is the second thing I need to be doing. But, again, what's the only thing I can control? Me, that's it. That's the only thing I can control is me. Now, students are very useful as reverse mentors. It's when we flip the relationship. Used to people said, oh, the teacher needs to know everything. The teacher does not need to know everything. My students taught me more about Scratch last week than I knew going in. I've been afraid of Scratch. How many of you are already teaching with Scratch? Okay, don't laugh at me, but I've been afraid of Scratch. And I've done programming before. I've done some pretty serious programming before. But for some reason, I can write code, but looking at those little blocks and putting them together just really blew my mind. But they had video games going after just 2 days. They've taught me so much. We're reverse mentors and we're flipping it. And that's a great thing to have your students do. Have them be reverse mentors in the experiences. So in my classroom, students are involved in the evolution of technology integration. They're part of it. I have them come in and say, Miss Vicki, I love this app. We could use this. Can we use that? I want them. I do an app of the week every week. And if they have an app of the week, they can earn a bonus. Dragon Dictation, all these great apps. I think every kid should know how to use Dragon Dictation if they have an iPhone or an iPad, or I think that's also available on Droid. But those are the kind of things that they should be involved in. So if they help build it, they're already there. Everything I build in my classroom, they help me. I don't create this cute little thing and say, everybody join. What I do is I create it and I ask them on Fridays. Fridays are Genius Hours. I say, is there anybody? We're getting ready to go into Ning, and it needs a facelift from last year. I have a private Ning, that's where we blog. I say, it needs a facelift from last year. I need a new design. Is there anybody who wants to go ahead and go in during Genius Hour and help me redo the look? And they are part of everything we do, because if they build it, they're already there. This is not a field of dreams. They need to be part of it. So when you pilot technology, the schools who really pilot it well, they have parents involved, they have students involved, they have teachers involved. They don't just have IT involved. They involve all those different groups of people. But again, we're not going to get discouraged, because the only thing I can control is me. Only thing I can control is me. So how do I influence behavior? How do I help other me's happen? Here's the problem with influencing. We are better at coping than exerting influence. We would rather have a pity party than a victory party. We all struggle with this. And we want to have victory parties, but it's so doggone easy to complain. It's so easy to fuss. Now, for me, I used to tell this because I had such a great story to tell. I'm on the other side of the story right now. I got couched to 5K. I got my Weight Watchers. I lost about 30 pounds. And then last year, I had a senior and a junior. I hurt my knee. And my 15 miles a week, the elliptical just didn't do it for me, and I didn't change my eating pattern. So now I'm on the top end of this. I've gained 50 pounds in a year. I'm not happy about it. Trying to figure out what works for me and try to do it. But we are a product of our habits. We are what we do every day, and we have to deal with those things. So am I just going to complain about it and whine about it? I think I've told y'all this. I haven't told anybody at my school that. No, I am working to exert influence. I've got my elliptical. I'm getting up in the mornings. I'm already heading the other direction. Of course, I'm coming here and eating amazing food, which is not helping, but I'm not going to just sit there and have a pity party. I want to have a victory party, and I've done it before and I can do it again. But here's the thing about the tools of influence. They are value neutral. All this social media and all this stuff out there, it can give us this. Okay, because that's spread across the country, and we do not like that. I was in Popeyes the other day. My oldest son was not happy with me. He was on break. There was a boy whose pants were down, and I said, "Pull up your pants, young man." And my son turned to me and said, "You are going to get a shot." And I'm like, "I'm sorry. I'm a teacher. I just have to say it. I can't help it. I can't leave the teacher behind. That's who I am." But this is what it also gives us. It gives us the pink shirt campaign. Anybody participating in the pink shirt? It comes up again in February this year. And a kid wore a pink shirt to school. His first day of school, he was a freshman. And some upperclassmen, I think there were some juniors, made fun of him. So one of the seniors found out about it. He went out and he took some summer money he had and he bought 50 shirts. He gave them to all the seniors, every senior that would wear a pink shirt. And the next day, most of the senior class wore a pink shirt. They all went in their pink shirts to the kids who were making fun of the kid who was in 9th grade and said, "We wear pink shirts. What do you have to say about it?" And the pink shirt movement was born. So the same way that the saggy pants were spread, the pink shirt movement has spread, and people have started wearing pink shirts on a certain day to stand up and say, "You know what, we're not going to put up with bullying because we're not going to have it." So tools of influence are value neutral. They can be used for positive. They can be used for negative. In fact, there's something called mirror neurons. Rizzolotti and Fugazi were studying a monkey, and they had this monkey hooked up to all these different sensors in his brain, and something interesting happened. Fugazi stood at the door, and he bit into a banana. All of a sudden, the monkey's brain lit up. It's like, what is happening? What is going on? And the parts of the monkey's brain lit up that light up when the monkey ate a banana. The monkey was not eating a banana. He was watching somebody eat a banana. Okay, this is called mirror neurons. It's actually why married people end up looking like each other. Okay, because we mirror the expressions of those people we're around. If people smile at us, we smile back. We are social creatures, and we mirror those we're around. So we have to ask ourselves, if people mirror us, kids mirror us, I want to stand at that door, I want to greet them by name, I want to look them in the eye, and I want to say, "How are you today?" And I want to call them by name. I want to know if they had sleep last night. I want to know if they feel good. I want to know if they're upset about something. I want to know that before I start teaching. Because you know what? If a kid comes in who's always a great kid, and they're puffy-eyed and they're upset, something went on, and I'm not going to be able to teach that kid until I say, "You know what? Are you okay? Is something wrong?" One time I had a kid who came in and said, "Miss Vicki, I was at the hospital all night. My mama had the baby at 6:45 this morning, and they picked me up and brought me to school and dropped me off. I've been awake all night." And you know what I did? It's the one time I've done it. I said, "You go to the back of my room." I have these I call them wonder chairs. I teach in the Wonder Lab, is what I call it. And they're big beanbag chairs. I said, "Here, you take the wonder chair and you go under that cabinet and you go to sleep." I mean, that was the right thing to do for that child. It's the only time I've ever told somebody to go to sleep, but it was the right thing. So people mirror those that we're around. So we have to ask ourselves, if people mirror us, what are they going to be like? Who are they going to be? Are they going to see somebody who's an overcomer? Are they going to see somebody who has a pity party? Are they going to see us complaining all the time about other teachers and other people, which we should never do to students anyway? So I promote change by influencing behavior, which I do not confuse with outcomes. I also connect myself to a good personal learning network, or PLN. Great book by Mark Hurst called Bit Literacy, about how to create a media diet. I don't have a lot of time to read. I read books at night. I read on my regular Kindle because it sends me no notifications. Okay, I don't read on my iPad. I cannot handle. I get 150, 200 tweets a day. I can't handle that. But I read on my Kindle. But I have a media diet. How do you build a media platform where you can learn things? Build your personal learning network. Here are some ways. You'll have to look back at this in Edmodo. I will post this presentation in Edmodo when I'm done. But I can control me. I can build my PLN. And back in 2005, I said, you know what? I can't do everything, but I can do something. I can take 15 minutes a day, 2 days a week during my break, and I can learn new stuff. So that's when I get on Twitter. That's when I play with things. That's when I learn things. So I connect myself to a good personal learning network. The other thing I've got to do is I've got to exercise. This is very important. Even though I'm not burning as many calories as I did when I ran 15 miles a week, you still have to exercise. You feel better. This is something they should see us doing. If people mirror us, what will they look like? Will they be fat and crabby and fussy? Or will they be fit and trying to make themselves better? And you know, we are fighting a losing battle, right? Last time I checked, it was 100% death rate. So we are fighting a losing battle, but it's about living a good life while we're here. And we live a better life when we exercise. We just do. So I connect to myself through exercise, humor, and time alone, and time with family. Family is so important. This is something in my early days of blogging that I had forgotten, and I'm so glad I've remembered that. But I have to care about me. I have to do the things I love. I have to laugh. I have to care about myself. And I have to take time alone to care about me. And when I care about me, then I can start caring with all the others that are in my life. The worst thing is a burnt out teacher. At the end of the year, we are all so fussy and crabby, and it's like, I don't even want to walk into my school. We're so exhausted. We've all been up all night grading, and so, you know, at my school, we're just kind of real careful at the end of the year, and we say, you know what, we're just not going to get in it. We're all fussy. We're all crabby. We're not seeing straight. But we have to care about ourselves so we can care about others. I can care about me because me turns into we. You don't have to influence everybody at once. There are two people the research shows that you need to focus your time with. You need to focus your time with formal leaders. That's your principals, that's your curriculum directors. And you need to focus your time with opinion leaders. Opinion leaders are the people that after you do a big training, they're the teacher that can go in the teacher's lounge and cross their arms. And they can do this. Nope. Okay, and it's done. Your whole initiative is dead. It is. So you need, when you're trying to promote technology change, you need to identify who are your opinion leaders. And sometimes it's really hard when the opinion leaders get burnt out because they can have a real negative influence. But formal leaders or opinion leaders are the two people that we need to work to influence change. Leaders are knowledgeable, trustworthy, and generous with their time. So if you want to become an opinion leader, our opinion leader at our school is our curriculum director who's been there for 30 years. Now, I've only been there 12. Honestly, I am starting to maybe be an opinion leader. Okay, maybe. But you know that when our school changed was when our curriculum director 3 years ago at the beginning of the year said, I have made a New Year's resolution to blog. It is important and I will do it. That's when my school changed. Not when Vicki said, oh, all this cool stuff is happening, and you know. It was when she decided to be the opinion leader and to make things change. You don't have to be the admin if you can influence the admin, and you don't have to be the teacher if you can influence the teacher. The question is, how can we be strategic about our influence? So, successful technology integration is people-centric. It's not about the gadgets, it's about the people who will be using the gadgets. Always remember that. So, I can control me. That's the only person I can control. And me turns into we very rapidly if we know how to influence change. So, I can use vicarious learning in the teachable moment. I'm going to go through these really quickly. You know how I said I'm afraid of sharks? Well, Albert Bandura did some studies, and there are all kinds of different phobias that are out there. Technophobia, phronemophobia, that's fear of thinking. Who has that? That's kind of scary. I think I might have some students like that. But if you influence deep beliefs, you have to see somebody else do it. So vicarious learning, they had people with snakes. And how are they going to get over a phobia of snakes? Well, Albert Bandura actually was able to help people get over a fear of snakes very, very rapidly. And the way he did it was he let people watch other people get close to snakes and handle them properly. And he did it in 3 hours. It's shocking to be able to do that, but that's vicarious learning. So sometimes somebody might change by watching somebody else do something powerful. And that's how I ended up in the Middle East and doing all kinds of cool things. It's watching other people I know do it. Okay, learning is a habit built into my weekly routines. I do it every week. This is what our PD looks like, and this is what it should look like. It should be a little bit at a time. I embed my learning 15 minutes 2 to 3 times a week. It's called Kaizen. Learning is a habit embedded in my weekly routines. I examine assessment very carefully because it becomes a product of what I measure. This is the problem with a lot of our assessment. False evidence appearing real, fear. We have to be real careful about this when we're talking about things, because a lot of times people go to school board meetings or board meetings and they'll say things that are not really based in reality. They're based in fear. The other thing, formative assessment is huge. How many of you are working with this? I love Socrative. I taught binary numbers with it, and oh, it was so nice to know what every single student knew before I moved ahead. So I'm going to carefully examine assessment. I'm going to talk about digital citizenship. The greatest software ever invented for dealing with digital citizenship is the human brain. Your virus will not overcome a human brain that is not educated, and all of us need to be educated about digital citizenship and know that online behavior has offline consequences. And I do not have time to go into these slides. They are going to be in there for you. What these slides are, this is from my new book called Reinventing Writing, and it's the kind of things that we need to be teaching in our schools. I urge you to go to Edmodo and download the presentation. I'll be putting it up there in a minute. But these are the kind of things that we need to be teaching as we're progressing into a world where we're writing electronically. Kids snap a picture of that board, but ask them to find it later. They don't. They can't. They're not reviewing those pictures that they take. So there's all kinds of things that kids need to know. And you can look back and see some of these bullets, and the book comes out in March. It's called Reinventing Writing. So all these different things and wikis are very important. I think every school should teach about wikis. Okay? So, second to last habit, I embrace multisensory learning. If Helen Keller were in your school, would she become Helen Keller? Work to find the strengths in every child. Strengths are very important. One thing I want you to notice, these are numbers. These are not. Kids are not numbers. And when we start using numbers to quantify, you can measure dollars, you can measure widgets, and kids are not widgets. And when we try to measure kids as numbers, then we start depersonalizing. The same thing happens in healthcare. When they start having a hospital that's not doing what it needs to do, and the upper management has started thinking about them as numbers, do you know what they tell them to do? This is from the Checklist Manifesto, by the way. They have the hospital administrators go talk to patients so they can remember that there's people behind those numbers. So I believe in myself, my students, and my school. This is the most important habit that we start with. And again, my question to you today is, will you be somebody's Beth? You need to remember that all of us influence somebody. A lot of you raised your hands when you said that kids come and talk to you. We all influence somebody. And how are you going to use that influence? Are you going to be for positive, or are you going to be for negative? And you know what? There's only one thing you can change, and what is that? That's it. Last thing I want to mention to you is, how do you eat a watermelon? You don't eat it whole. Some of you are going to try to eat a watermelon at this conference. You're going to try to take in too much. And what I always do is you eat a watermelon one bite at a time. What you need to do is pick your next 3 things. I call them my big 3. What are my next 3 things I'm going to do? So I would just encourage you, as you're here at the conference, to pick 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're going to do when you go back and do them. So thanks for having me.